Okay, so I'm live again, I think. I hope the picture quality is okay and that, well, it's probably best if you don't see me, but I know it's hard to look at a video if you can't see people speaking, but I'm not sure if I've got it correct or not. Okay, because it's a different spot. But anyway, I felt compelled to finish the video yesterday because I didn't finish it really, and I don't think that I kind of said what I wanted to say. But I'm going to just try to be brief. I know that's impossible for me and I apologise. Look, we're spiritual beings, right? In a physical body. Our thought creates reality and we're all connected. That's the basics. I always say that, but that's the basics of what we were put here for in the beginning. This is what I believe to be true. If this is not true, then a lot of the other stuff does not. It's still, I mean, to be honest, even if that is not true, some of this stuff that I say is still relevant and it still exists too. It's just that it makes humans, and I say humans, I mean man and woman that were originally put on this earth, that we perceive to be a human, not anything to do with technology, shall we say, in their authentic natural state. That is what that's what we say a human is, okay? Now, once again, that is the basic truth of what a human being is. But that does not mean that in me saying that that what created us originally, a God-like being, something that created us and put us here in the beginning, that doesn't mean that there isn't scientific things behind that or whatever, because I do not understand. No one can understand creation. Now, whether we're meant to or not, I don't know. Certainly we're meant to understand infinitely more than what we actually do. That I do know. Even though I don't understand it myself and it's held back from me, I know that we are meant to know all and that we should know all, but we are compromised, as I've said before. Our bodies, which are quite important for us, as I've said before, even though we don't realise it, we belittle the body because the body has been devastated in this reality, okay? And the reason for that is because that limits us, and it does limit us incredibly. It keeps us in this 3D, shall we say, video game that is very material and is very closed and is very primitive and limited by comparison with the universe, shall we say. And I think most people would probably know that. But if you accept, as someone said only yesterday, I was watching a video, we live in a bubble. And that's so true. It's like that. We're in a bubble. It's a closed system, as I've said before. You can call it a bubble, you can call it whatever. I'm sure that the bubble thing might be more accurate in the sense that it could well be a bubble that is like a bubble in water. Yeah, like a bubble in water. I think there's a possibility of that very strongly because I sense a strong connection to water. A strong connection to water. That we come maybe from water or something. I know that, well, I don't know, but from the information I've got, the God entity has been connected to water too. If you take the mythological gods, there's a movie out called Aquaman at the moment. I have not seen it. I just saw the poster the other day and immediately it come to me. Aquaman. That would be like Poseidon back in the ancient times. You know, he was like Poseidon, he was in the water, but there again, you'll have to go to other sources because I'm ignorant on the real history. Because I've only just realised that it's true now. It's a bit like saying there's elements in the Bible that are true and elements in all these things that are true. But Poseidon was the god back then. Aquaman they talk about now. And those gods were the demigods that now rule this world, possibly, okay? That's how it works. But they are now a god because you're a demigod until you take over everything. But when you take over everything, you become then a total god. At least only in this domain. Only in this domain, only in Earth. Because we've allowed the demigod to become the full God. Oh, we allow that because it's up to us who is the God. We choose the God. There may well be, as I've said before, originally a creator God that might have created us, plonked us onto the earth for the living library. I shouldn't say plonked, sorry, sounds, but I'm trying to make light of what is very serious. And then the demigods came, manipulated the human, mankind you could say, right, changed the DNA, altered everything so that they would be servants for the god or the demigods. And the reason I say this, I'm going to try to keep on track here because this is what I was trying to say yesterday, okay? The reason for this is because as I've said before about the cat thing, but I won't go on about the cat. In other words, you can have a person, an animal, or anything, and you can serve that animal conditionally or unconditionally. Conditionally means that you have to give the animal or the human being something in return for the love that it gives you. It only loves you if you give it something. You know, like unconditional love and conditional love in relationships. Some families have that. You have parents that will only love you if you fulfill their dreams and behave as they expect and want you to behave. And you have others that give unconditional love and accept you as an individual, and no matter what you do in this world, they love you because they just love you. In fact, the more individual you are, and if you're true to yourself, they will love you more. Well, they will, and they will allow you that freedom to develop as you want to, what fulfills you. Whereas the other only loves you if you fulfill what suits them, what fulfills their needs in life, their fantasies, their dreams, not yours. You see, this is how it works, and this is how the God entity works. Those who serve him will be rewarded, and those that don't will not. But there's no unconditional love by the God entity that was once spiritual. If you take it from a fallen angel point of view, the fallen angel fell, became what some people would call Satan, although I don't like to use titles. I do not know if that is a correct title or not. But she, that entity would be the would then become the opposing force to the creator God, if that exists too. You'd have to have positive and negative. Are you following me? Because I'm not putting this very well, because I could be very blunt and put it in biblical or religious terms, but I choose not to, because I don't want to get into the religions and things too much. I don't want to be specific, even though if someone's listening and they're probably on a better track than me. But I'm not here to do that. I'm here only to put the ideas as though they're a fantasy. It's for you to decide if they're true or if they're fantasy, not true, whatever. You know, I'm not here to uh, to give a total scenario, because that has not been my life. And so I don't feel that I'm supposed to do that. I could come here and say I'm some sort of convert and that has changed, because that is certainly true. I have changed. I've realised and woke up to things, but that is still, I just choose not to do that at this point. But I will say that today, just before I made the video, I felt almost very totally spiritual, only in the sense that I could see manifesting almost in front of me the dark forces or the spiritual beings that do control this world. And I don't mean that I could see them visually, I mean that I can see the magic that they perform around. But it is negative magic, it's not positive magic. They operate for the negative. Their duality, as I say, the God entity is duality, which means right, wrong, good, bad. And even in creating that good, bad scenario, as I've said before, that creates chaos and leaves humans in the position where they are open to be where they've got a choice of two paths, and that means that they are open to go down the wrong path too. You know what I'm trying to say there? Whereas originally humans would have probably only seen one path. One path. They would have only seen, probably, in the Garden of Eden, before corruption, before confusion, before being led down and shown two paths, shall we say. See, the intervention by the God entity, whatever name you want to give him, serpent, fallen angel, Satan, whatever word you want to use, it doesn't matter. That entity showed man that there were two paths, a good and a bad, a right and a wrong, whereas before they would have only seen one path, and they would have only seen perhaps the positive or the good. They were not opened up to the so-called knowledge of good and evil. Knowledge of good and evil. Now that's interesting. I've gone off track again, I know, but that knowledge of good and evil. Do we need to know the knowledge of good and evil, as I said before? Do I need to have knowledge of evil? In this world, yes, you probably do. But not in the Garden of Eden. No, you probably did not have to have knowledge of evil. In fact, the evil, if it get even the knowledge of evil, I think if you see too much of it, it changes the human being into thinking negative, because we are delicate beings that are all frequency and vibration. And that frequency and vibration, evidently, that creates the matter and the real world. And that can create then negativity, because our thoughts are quite powerful combined. They create the reality. But as I said before, we're unaware of that, and we do not have full control of it anymore. And also, there is not as many human beings that are at a high spiritual level to receive and to create correctly anyway. We're all corrupted. So, we're not sending out good vibrations all the time. In fact, most of the time we're sending out very bad vibrations, negative vibrations, destructive vibrations. This is the problem. And we're unaware that everything we say and do has a negative connotation on this whole world. We don't know our own power, you could almost say, because this has been kept from us, because the satanic forces, shall we say, like humans to think that they have, by satanic I mean negative influences, negative, the God uses negative influences to control the world. Now, so I say satanic because that's a word that people are familiar with. There are people who worship these religions, and that is regarded as the opposite to a creator God uh, in the biblical text and things that we have been familiar with for a long time. Now, how true all these things are, I'm just putting it there, okay? It's for you to make things of them. I'm speculating. I see the world going backwards and forwards, and this is speculation on what controls it all and how they are thinking, which is very strange to think that I'm trying to analyse and think how the dark forces think, but you don't have to think too hard, because you just have to observe. Really, you observe the world and you observe what's around you, and knowledge of people that you've dealt with and your own life, because you see yourself creating negativity, and so therefore you can see it. Once you see it in yourself and you realize what you've done and what you've dealt with in your life, then you take it further, one step further. Extend it then to what's around you, and then extend it to the whole world. And it all is the same if you really look at it. That's what I realise now. It's all the same. It's all negative, but it's all spiritual, even though it's all negative. But it's a spiritual, at least it's all spiritual for the human being. Even though they are now dealing with concrete reality, but they're also dealing with dark negative forces that are spiritual, but they were spiritual, but they've turned negative spiritually, and they have incorporated technology into the negative forces have incorporated technology so much into their being that they are now not spiritual. So they are now technical. And once you become technical, I've said before, you lose your spirituality, you lose your spirit. So therefore you're a totally different entity. And if you become technical, you become negative. You become non-feeling, non-thinking, basically, your whole way of thinking is very much like a psychopath, to be honest. It's like that, except that it's at a high technical level and at a genius level. So you can imagine why this world is in such a volatile state, because you can imagine that if you allow a scientist that is a genius and has the capability of the vastest technology that humans at their spiritual level are totally unaware of, but also, as I've said before, this would not matter if humans were at a high spiritual level, I do not think. Then they would be able to deal with the massive high technology, because they would be at their superior best too. And my personal belief is that the higher spiritual level is no match for the highest technological level. But if you are at, as I've said before, the lower spiritual level, which we are kept at because of negativity, and because we are in the dark and do not even realize that we're spiritual beings and that we have vast capabilities that no technology could match, we see ourselves as very limited, and the technology then takes us totally over, and that's what's happened, and that's what happens in the world. So therefore the dark forces that have become highly technological, then they have total control, and they had then become the god of this world. And this is not what the original intention obviously was when we were planted here as a living library, to develop and evolve naturally and slowly and to reach our full capacity as spiritual beings to where we would know everything and create, supposedly protect and create a perfect, wonderful earth, really, that we could not even imagine because it's gone completely the other way. It probably was supposed to even be created and got better, even from the original Garden of Eden, which was already perfect as far as we're told, and had everything. So all we had to do was relax and evolve and learn our capabilities and develop that way instead. And the technical God has done that, but he has done that at a technological level. He has only concentrated on technology because if you're a spiritual being, I would imagine you probably, once you turn away from being a spiritual being and become angry and resentful and negative and hateful, I would imagine the spirituality goes down, because spirituality in a way is very much enhanced by the reverse of that, from what I can see. It's the spirituality, the so-called enlightenment, even that word. I'm trying to use words. I hate using words, but I can't find words to describe. And I don't want to be fancy, because if you say enlightenment, it sounds like a big deal. But actually, it is a big deal, because it is saying that at the highest spiritual level, you know everything, you are capable of everything and anything. Your mind can literally create and do wonders. You're not restricted by this physical body anymore, which is the idea of this world, is to keep you totally in the limited physical body to where you're restricted, and to therefore where the technological God is king. In the land of the blind, the one-eyed God is king. In the land of the blind, the one-eyed God is king. Now, if people like this, right, if people want this, choose it, which they have, that is fine. If they choose to be blind and to let the one-eyed God see everything for them and create the reality for them, instead of them creating with two eyes any reality they want, that is fine. It is a choice. If they prefer the technology, if they want to be lazy, shall we say, don't want to create themselves and want a negative world created for them, because it will be negative, it will be dark, it will be more destructive, it will not be natural and beautiful, because that is not possible with technology. Technology is not natural. Human beings are meant to be natural and spiritual, you see. So it is a different world that some people are seeking. Now, whether some people have sought this deliberately, or whether this is what occurred to me, and I was thinking about some fairly famous people, but I'm not going to mention names because I don't know that much about a lot of well-known people. But it does strike me that there are some quite that there are some people, and no doubt this applies to everyone, but more so if you do a deal with the darker forces in return for fame and fortune, shall we say. In other words, if you've got talents and you want to be rich and famous, you will have to work with the top people of this world to get that, and they will be the disciples of the God, of course, because that there will be a hierarchy in this world, you know. Because the God entity, even a good God or a negative God or any God, will have disciples, and they will choose the ones that are most beneficial to them at the top, and to be their disciples and their followers. But this applies even more so. This applies 100% to the God entity that rules this world, because the God entity that rules this world does not do anything without an exchange. He's an exchange God. You do for him, he does for you. Whereas the original creator God, I would think, would have been different to that, because otherwise we wouldn't have been put in the Garden of Eden and left to our own devices, for good or bad. Unfortunately, we had well, of course, if there had not been intervention and had there not been the arrival of the technological gods, etc., we would probably be spiritually evolved by now. Maybe, probably, I would imagine. I don't know how long it all takes, because time is not relevant. We see time very strange. We don't understand time. We don't, like, I have heard that even the technological gods, that what is 100 years for us, which is a long time, is, like a very short time for them. Could even be as short as very short time. So we are very confused by time too. This is what I was informed, and this is how they do not have any problem waiting for things to change, or changing things what we appear to be slowly. Although if you look at the world now, it's changing very fast. So there is a certain frantic activity going on, because in the past things have always even changed for us humans very slowly, in our time. Whereas now, if you look over the last 20, 30 years with technology, it's bombarding us. It's literally bombarding us at a vast rate. We had TVs even for a long time, and different things. Even with technology, it was much slower at the start, whereas now it's like really coming down fast, almost as if to say, don't think about not accepting the technology, don't think about going back to nature. Keep with it, get a new device, make it more strong, but make it more into your life, make it more so that you don't think for yourself, make it more so that you don't do for yourself, because it does make us very lazy, technology, let's face it. And while we're lazy, instead of relaxing and meditating, shall we say, and getting in touch with our spiritual side, we're not doing that either. We're actually just on the device more, in my opinion. At least that's what I've observed looking around, and even I'm guilty of it. But I would only be guilty of it because it's here, and they make it a necessity anyway. They make it a necessity for you to actually survive now in this physical world, to use technology. But anyway, I've gone off the track. The point is that the God entity, right, I do hope I'm putting this well, the God entity does demand servitude. You must serve the God entity, whereas the original God that put us here gave us free will, I would imagine, because otherwise we wouldn't have been taken over by other gods, would we? So we were left here and given free will to make our own world. Unfortunately, it went wrong, because we didn't stay making our own world, I would imagine, if you look at it that way. This is from this scenario. This is from this so-called fantasy scenario, okay? But many people believe it, and it's for everyone to decide, I guess, But the thing is that if you look at the world, there's certainly some elements of truth to it, isn't there? I mean, I would have to say definitely, and maybe more than some elements, but obviously there's, I can't put all the pieces together. That's for you to do. And the more people, the humans that know the histories and really look into everything and do have a spiritual core, they will be able to piece it together much better than me, and they may even have the ability to raise their mindset to where they think, as I've said before, anything negative, even if it's correct negative, is used by the God entity to create a negative reality. Now, as I said before, the God demands servitude. This God, the original God, probably did not. I'm guessing that because we still have free will, strangely enough, but it's very debatable if we do. We still do, but see, we have had the free will to say no to the technology, but we've allowed it to encase us, and we have allowed, not deliberately most of the time, the same way that I have allowed. That's why the title of the video was "The Archon Future Prophecy is Fulfilled by Us." So every negative thing that I've done in my life, every wrong choice I've made, every time I've been presented with two choices and I have made the negative wrong choice knowingly, usually out of convenience or fear, usually fear and being told that you're a limited human being, you can't even do the right thing because you will fail, because you're a limited, weak, pathetical human being. This was how I was told in my life. This was the scenario that was always presented to me, and I bought it. And I didn't have enough courage or enough strength of character or enough spirituality or enough decency or enough awareness to realise that down the track that truth would come back to bite me, and that it would create a negative reality. And the more mistakes you make from the day you're born right up to right now, that every time you make that negative choice, that wrong choice, that is where you don't choose love, or where you don't choose doing the compassionate thing, what you should really know as a human being is the correct thing. Every time you are selfish, particularly, because see, the fear makes us selfish. That's what it's done with me. The fear has made me selfish, even though you don't really want to be selfish. You might not want to be, but the fear makes you selfish. You're presented with fear. You think you can't do it. You think you've been told you're limited, and you believe it, and you become limited too. So it becomes a reality. So you fulfill your own prophecy too, your own fears of what you think you are, and you think you're weak, and you think you can't do certain things. That fear then creates that reality for you. You don't end up pushing past it and showing yourself that you really can do it. But also, if you knew that it doesn't matter, that even if you fail at trying to do the best, you are still better off than taking the easy course in doing something selfish and wrong. That's probably what I've realised now. It works for a while. It buys you a few years where it's not so hard, or what you think is not so hard. But is it not so hard when those few years, like myself, are basically riddled with guilt anyway, because you half know that you've done the wrong thing? And also, you don't realise, this is something that struck me, you don't realise what you really missed. In playing it safe, which is what people are doing in this world now, they do it every day. They opt for security and safeness and being protected by the God entity systems, you could say even. In doing that, they're not living, and they're not really happy. And sure, their body is safe. Well, actually, it's really not, because this body is really compromised in this reality. This is the joke of it. This is the joke of it, is the deception is so great that we don't know that we're not really keeping our body safe. We're not keeping our mind safe. We're not making ourselves happy. Oh, it's very hard to explain, but it's like, we think that, that we're keeping ourselves safe and we're keeping ourselves to live a bit longer. But in reality, that's only because we don't know that the very environment we're living in is depleting our body, depleting our physical body, making our lives shorter in this reality, even though we believe we are advanced and going further into longevity. No, that is not the case. This human body is compromised beyond belief. That's why if we could reach our high spiritual level, we would know this, because then we would access all our abilities, and we would know that we have a super body really, but that body has been turned into rubbish because of the environment, what goes on around us, and even what we put into it. We poison it, and the environment then poisons us. And this is all negativity that we have created by our thinking, by making negative choices, as I've done through my life. If I had been more, if I had just done what I really wanted to do, instead of being filled with fear by the environment around me, by my upbringing, by the this is all a blame thing, I know, and it is a test. Let's just say that I failed the test, and most people are failing the test, and it's a tough test. That's the problem. It makes it so hard that you take what you think is the easy way out. But, it will come back to bite you, and it does come back to bite you. It comes back to bite you at a physical level, it comes back to bite you at a personal level, and it comes back to bite you at a world earth level, to where the whole environment around you then becomes negative by all of this. So you see what I'm trying to say is that the Archon future, and I say prophecy because it has been prophesied in books. Not going to mention which or what, but those that know will know, and know more than me, because I do not study these things enough at all. In fact, I don't study them at all. I'm, as I said before, very basic. So if you study them, you'll know it. But the thing is that it is fulfilled by us. We still have free choice, but we have allowed everything to happen. Sometimes we do it consciously. Most of the time, it just slips in. Like the technology and stuff that now engulfs the world is something that we have just allowed to slip in. We haven't actually consciously, I don't think that, I suppose I could say the day you buy your first computer or the day you first use a computer, you have made a choice to incorporate technology, whereas before you didn't, and that's true. But in doing that, most people did not realise how much it would go, how far it would go. They probably should have. And some people probably were fearful for a while, which was why it took a few years for these things to infiltrate. And they do infiltrate. I think that is a good word. They literally infiltrate our lives, our minds, and eventually our spirit, and become like the God entity, where they take over your spirit to where you end up with no spirit. So once you have no spirit, then you cannot go back. Then you will become a technological being that is limited to only advancing at a technological level. And as I've said before, my personal belief is that there is no comparison between the high spiritual level, even though that is not possible for us to see. This is the tragedy of what has happened in this world, is that we cannot see the high spiritual level, so we think that the technological level is the high level, because we have been pushed into such a limited spiritual state. I'm aware of it, or at least I see that if I look at the reality. But because I have allowed that to happen, I'm still at that low level, plus the fact that the dark forces are all around, and the negative and the technology is all around, and all the things that deplete the body and bring it even lower. The human body at the moment is at the lowest level that it has ever been, and sinking lower. In fact, we're talking about death here, really. But what I'm saying is that all these things, the lower they get, that also means that the spiritual level is getting low too. right down at the lower spiritual level. So naturally we think that technology is the way and wonderful and vast, because the technology, even though we have actually quite limited technology in comparison naturally with the God entity and even his followers, disciples, shall we say, because, but still, it still appears to be, because we have sunk to such a low level, it appears to be more. I know myself. It has more information than what I have, even though the information is, in my opinion, false information. Because it's no good going on the computer learning about all the history and about science and about all these things if they are not relevant to the spiritual human being, because I do not think they are relevant to spiritual human being. In fact, they don't tell you you're even a spiritual human being. They don't tell you that you should be able to do vast things and that you should know how everything works. No, they tell you that science, and that they are now looking to find out how things work. The God entity already knows how things work, because that's how he creates this fake reality to keep us limited so that we serve him. Now, anyway, what I was going to say was that there are some people, a lot of people probably, even for all I know, maybe much more than what I realise. I do not know the numbers, but they're probably a lot vaster. In fact, they could be the majority of the population, I would think, probably. That, certainly, indirectly, everyone is serving the God entity, okay? That's a fact. We serve the matrix, we serve the systems that run this world, and that is the God entity's world. He has created that. Now, we create it by allowing it. We let him create the technological world by allowing that and by incorporating it into our daily lives and into our reality. That's common sense, isn't it? But anyway, I'm going to say that the God entity, right, if you look at it, as I've said, there are some people who serve the God entity directly, right? Let me finish. This is all negative. If you think that a plane going 2 foot over your roof is just natural and that it is a necessary evil of our society, in other words, the noise and that you have to have an airport to go where you're going, and therefore it has to go over your roof, that is the reality. That's what you call living in reality and saying that that is okay and that that is normal. I say it is not. I say it is part of the matrix and it is the dark negative entity. I say nothing happens by accident. Everything is controlled. It's a completely controlled environment. The God entity controls every little thing. He is a mastermind at that genius negative level, and he uses technology. Even the aeroplanes and the cars and things we used are all his inventions that he gives to us so that we live a certain way. Not so that we become spiritual beings and could literally just fly or levitate, shall we say. No. That way we live in his negative technological world. Limited negative technological world where we serve him. Now, if you like this negative physical, very dense physical, negative technological world, then you are in the right place, because this is what it is. But you will never get out either. You will go further into that and become stuck here. Whereas we're not really meant to just be in the one place, I don't think. Spiritual beings, common sense would tell you that naturally you don't have to be confined to one space, I wouldn't think, But anyway, there are some people, a lot of people probably even, but certainly those that are rewarded the most. The rich and famous, for instance, if you want to be rich and famous, you must serve the God entity because it's his world. But I think that some people, maybe even some people that are rewarded for their fame and fortune, shall we say, for the physical benefits of this world, because this world is such a physical world that we love the physical things. And we need them even in this physical reality too, because that's how it operates. That's how it gets you in. It makes the physical things a necessity for your survival here. And then you lose sight of the fact that you should be able to create even the physical yourself. So basically, it's a real mind game. It's even I can't get my head around it most of the time, but that is the reality. It's a mind game that really is playing humans and has played them to where they're right down to nothing. I believe that we are at the worst level that in fact, some people talk about the end times. Well, if, I don't know much about that, but I would say that that is a strong possibility in light of what you look at, okay? Now, just wait for that aeroplane, that technological aeroplane that we need to get round to go over and to send out its bad, negative, noisy vibration that goes through the human being. At least you're aware of that, but it makes you cringe, and if you have enough of that, that brings your vibration right down. That's why mine is down. I'm in the wrong place. I'm being bombarded with negative technological energy, okay? And this is the reality for most people. With the technology, the computers and the internet, all that stuff that goes through the air, that also is another frequency that we can't hear or see at all. It is a touch, it is a invisible negative frequency that goes through the air, that controls us and that manipulates our mood and our thoughts. And once your frequency goes down low, then it is very easy for the powers that be, the negative fallen angel dark forces, you could say. They have the technology. This is really a physical, technological thing too, even though it's all about a spirituality and a spiritual world, because that's what we are. Then they can use that technology to put negative thoughts into your head, whether it be just by something as simple as listening to a negative song on the radio. Something as simple as listening to negative music on the radio can literally fill your mind with garbage, negative thinking, destructive thinking, anti-live thinking. I say anti-live because I've always said evil backwards is live. They go in for this reverse stuff, evidently. All the symbols, all the reverse stuff. And so if evil backwards is live, this world is anti-live, anti-life, anti-human life in particular, and anti anything that is organic life. Even though, like I say, you could say, hey, if it's all a matrix, if it's all some sort of simulation, then it's all numbers, so it's all kind of a computer thing anyway. But I think that is the reality, sure. But humans are still different to the technology, and they are able to create the reality with their thinking and stuffs and their feelings and their thoughts, which also, by the way, as I've said before, I've gone off track again. The thinkings and the feelings, if you become technological, you lose the thinking, the feelings and the emotions. You lose that because you substitute intellect and technology for the feelings and the emotions. Once the spiritual being becomes technological and loses their emotions and their feelings and those positive vibrations, shall we say, those positive frequencies, they cannot combat the negative frequencies. They can't protect themselves from them. And once you give your mind over to being intellectual as opposed to thinking, feeling, and emotional, you're given up. You will eventually give up. If you become a technological being, you will give up your creative ability. You will give up the ability that you originally had to create reality with your thinking, feeling, and emotions. You see what I'm saying? This is what the technology is about. And then this world becomes a totally controlled technological domain of the technological God, and he has total dominion then. Then your free choice will not matter one little bit, because you won't really have free choice anymore then. You will not be a free choice, spiritual, individual being. You will be a controlled technological being, and you will have no ability to create reality at all. So therefore, if you take it from a spiritual or even a religious kind of point of view, that means that then the dark satanic forces, the technological being, Satan, if you like, okay, wins and takes over the spiritual beings. The Creator's creation is then destroyed and taken over. And then we have the situation where, if you want to take it from this fantastic point of view of Satan versus some other god, right? You can pick that for yourself, because I'm not going to go into various religions. I think a lot of them are really, they've got it all wrong in a way, but then I don't know either. But they still probably should just be acknowledging the one creator, God, somehow, and that who or what that is and what they were when they came to earth, etc. By that I mean who his representatives were in the past coming here, etc. That is for you to decide, okay? But I've gone off the track. But then what I'm saying is that when Satan finally closes down this entire earth with technology, because technology, I believe, is the key. Fear is the key for human beings, as I've said before. Fear is used, like it has in my life, to restrict our physical and our spiritual advancement to where we know all this, and to where we can not only know it, but actually put it into practice. It's no good like myself knowing it. In fact, it's actually depressing knowing it. It's almost better to be the negative little limited human being if you can't operate with other spiritual beings and change the reality. It's almost like saying, hey, we should have been able to free ourselves, but instead we're trapped. So it's really depressing. Whereas if you're just dealing with the physical, you almost can operate that way and almost be content and say, well, yes, we're limited human beings, so we just got to battle it out at the physical level, and maybe we'll get some breakthrough at that level. Maybe the technology won't be so bad. Maybe we can use technology to get a breakthrough. You know, some people believe that. Even some spiritual people that I've seen on various things believe that. Well, I hope they're right. I would be skeptical myself, but then again, I'm a negative, skeptical person. I hope they're right. But certainly, even something evil can be used for something good. If you are spiritually advanced enough and spiritually inclined, yes, you probably can. Shouldn't have to, but you know, you have what is available and the circumstances. It's certainly a test at this time. It's a vast test, because the means that, to be surrounded by so much negativity and so much depletion of everything, I mean, I can literally feel it at me. At a physical level, it is devastating, and at an emotional and spiritual level, it is devastating as well. It's but anyway, what I was saying was that if this happens, I think that taking it from the scenario of God and Satan, okay? We'll take it from that fantasy scenario. Satan, the negative technological God entity. If you take it from a prophecy point of view, and if there is a higher power, then the prophecy, if it's biblical even, will be fulfilled, that even Satan's reign should be short. But that does not matter to Satan, because he lives in the moment. He's a technological being, and he wants to defeat this world in the sense that he wants it to be a technological world 100%, which is the reverse of what was originally intended, where we were spiritual beings and meant to be advanced at a high spiritual level. So that is his way, because he has been rejected by the Creator God, shall we say. This is the fantasy scenario. He's been rejected by the Creator God, and he is angry and resentful because it has turned him into something that even he does not really like, I don't think, because he was a spiritual, high spiritual being originally. He was of the Most High. He was second to none, second only to the God entity, really, revered, etc. This is what I've been told. So he's now been reduced to a technological being, and he's become angry. Now, how this and why this happened 100%, I do not fully know. Some people say that, it was a mental choice, but I would doubt that. I would say that something happened to Satan himself, to where he became as us humans are now, because he has created us. You know how we were created originally in the likeness of the Creator God as spiritual beings? Well, now he has made us, and has made me in my life too follow him and be like him, do the things that he would do in all the circumstances that are presented to us. Always do the negative, wrong thing. Always do the destructive thing. Always do the non-spiritual thing. And so he has created human beings that are now psychopathic, which is the same thing. Therefore, they are not spiritual. They are not caring. They're not loving. They do not have feelings about other human beings. Their feelings are only about serving themselves. This is how the God entity eventually made himself. And technology encourages that, and eventually does that even more, because when you use technology, that is a mechanical thing. It does the thinking for you. It tells you how you should think and feel. And if that is created by a negative being, you can be sure that you are not going to be feeling, it tricks you at the start, naturally. All these things have to get spiritual human beings in by pretending to the spiritual human being that these things are loving and that they're a connection, when we should have had our rightful natural connection to one another anyway, which has been taken from us. Now we connect through the technology, and so we think it's a good thing, and we converse and may even do some things that are loving through the internet. This is the trick of it all, because it is a negative technology, whichever way you look at it, unfortunately. So even if you're using it to send a love letter to your beloved, not how it's meant to be. And down the track, what started out as a loving, good, communicative thing and a connection will turn out to be a control, suppression of the human spiritual being. It has to be, because that is why it is here. Because, the idea is to serve the God entity, and he's technological. But anyway, she, the entity, everything bad that has happened to the entity, the God entity, he wants bad to happen to the human spiritual being, because he resents and has resented from the start that he was supposed to. This is getting back to what I was trying to say at the start. I wish someone would tell me to keep on track. I'm getting angry with myself because I'm not doing this right. I'm sorry. As I've said before, you can serve a being, you can give unconditional love, okay? That's what we're meant to do, but it's what we don't do. And it's what I haven't done either. Unconditional love, where you serve another human or another living thing unconditionally. You don't control it. You don't only give it something if it gives you something. Now, the God entity has turned human beings into replicas of himself, the opposite to what the original creator God would have done when he put us in the Garden of Eden, where we were given free choice and we were created in his image. Now, Satan, who has become confused, angry, and upset by being rejected because he would not serve and not look after the human beings. He did not like, evidently, this is what I've been informed, did not like the human beings when they were created. When the Creator God created the human beings as spiritual beings with the best of himself in them, Satan did not like this because the God entity said, although you are the highest being, please look after my creation. They will develop and be better than us. They will develop and be the best of us, shall we say. I'm trying to put it some way, you know. I'm not doing it very well. But even at that point, something happened to where, because Satan himself in the heavens, even when he was the spiritual being in the heavens, was so revered. You know how they say in the Bible, I saw on the videos, he was the most high until iniquity was found in him. That means until some fault was found in him to where he got jealous and resentful. And he did not want to serve the human beings. He didn't want to look after them. You know how I said that some of us want to look after the cat or the dog or the animals, but we don't expect much in return. We let them be. We just love them because they are unique. It doesn't matter that they're less than us, or it wouldn't matter if they were better than us. That doesn't come into it. But to another human, particularly to the humans who are now living here now because they are under the influence of the satanic influence, shall we say, yeah. They think that way. They're selfish, very selfish, you know, and we've all been that way. I've been that way. But I just realise it now that it doesn't create a good reality, unfortunately. So even if you are selfish, it will not benefit you down the track. It will only lead to, because you really were originally a spiritual being, every time you do something negative, it only creates a negative reality. Every time you do something totally selfish that's negative, I'm not saying you shouldn't look after yourself, but if you do something for yourself that hurts another, then it creates a negative reality. And that's what we do. Most of the time, if we're faced with the choice between ourselves and someone else, we will choose ourselves. And sometimes we'll even do it just for the fun of it, some people nowadays. That's how because we've got the ego going. The ego makes us then feel unimportant and as though we're not spiritual beings and not special. So therefore, the ego takes over and we act negatively towards other humans to prove that we're more superior. We have this complex. We have this inferiority complex. And instead of dealing with that, and we don't know who we are anyway, we then develop this superiority complex to where our ego says, I've got to prove that I'm better than that person because that person is doing better than me. And that's the society and the world we live in where we're bombarded with this. That's why, these famous people will sell their spirituality, shall we say, in order to have riches, fame and fortune and to live a very comfortable physical existence, more than comfortable, luxurious, and even be given some extra powers. Like maybe if you're a singer, they might give you a really good voice to sing on stage, and that's an exchange, and you will get all the riches provided you work for the God entity and serve him and bow down to him. Now, some have done this because some of these very people that now serve the dark side, shall we say, that now are rewarded by the dark side in terms of monetary gain, money and fame and adulation by the masses, by you and me. Well, I've done that. You know, I've looked up to the 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 stars and things, you know. I mean the celebrity type stars. Should be looking to our own stars, not to the but we do. And I have done this. Now, some of these people wanted, I think, originally they were spiritual human beings, more than maybe even me at the start, wanting to find the real creator God, wanting to be spiritually brought up by the God, by the creator God, not by Satan, shall we say, by the opposite, the one that created them originally. But they turned to Satan because they felt that the original God had let them down, was not there for them, whereas Satan's there for them because he controls this world and because he will give them physical things in return for their service. And he will show them limited powers, but still some powers. He won't let them advance to their full high spiritual level, but they don't know that can happen anyway. So they think that he is the real God, and he is the real God of this world because we've let him and because we put him there. But what I'm saying is some of these people were looking for another God, their original creator God, but they felt that God was not there for them. They couldn't reach him. They couldn't talk to him. You know, this other God is closer to them. Of course he is, because he rules this world. You see, what we don't realise, and what I didn't realise either, is that that's how it was meant to be. We were put here originally. You see, there was a condition put on things, right? That when we were put here, we were put here and given free choice and were allowed to be totally free and evolve naturally to our highest level. That was, it was like almost you could say it was, I suppose you could say it was a test. It was a chance that the Creator God took, and he was hoping that because we were spiritual beings, that we would just continue on that path and that we would not fall, and that we, even if we were tempted, that we would realize, because we were spiritual beings, not to be tempted by the dark side. But unfortunately that did happen, and once it happened, it got worse and worse and worse. And the God entity, the true creator God, if you believe in that God and Satan thing, okay, there again, I'm saying if you believe in it, if you don't, that's another thing. And I'm not saying whether you should or shouldn't. But many people do worship this God, which is a reflection. You know, the satanic beliefs on this planet, I think, this is just what I think, and I could be wrong, a reflection of the true technological God entity that has the real power, that is like the fallen angel or whatever. That actual religion on the earth is a reflection of that, but I'm not sure, you know, how, oh, I've gone off the track. I'm not sure how correct they are in really, or how directly they're really worshipping it, you know, like whether they really understand it fully or whether they are really worshipping and talking directly to the God entity, or whether it isn't just like our religions on this world where we think we're in contact with some sort of God, but we're actually not. Look, the original God entity that created in the beginning in the Garden of Eden left. And we were meant to be tested and evolve naturally and spiritually on our own. So we're not meant to be talking to that God directly now. We don't. We have to find our own path. It is a very vast test, and it has become unbelievably hard, almost impossible, because we have ventured so far from our own spirituality and from what we are. So some of these people, these humans that have turned to the dark side, shall we say, or to the who decide to worship, say, Satan or whatever, that effigy or that whatever that is. I do not understand these things, and I'll say I don't. They have went that way because they wanted to be in contact with the original God entity, with their true creator, you could almost say. But their true creator was not there for them, because that is the whole purpose. He, she, whatever that is non-intervention. It's about you being free to make your own choices and hopefully make the right choices, you see. It's freedom. Satan will look after you, but you will not be free. It will be an exchange. And if you don't exchange with that entity, you will be, you won't be rewarded. In fact, you could be the opposite. So that's how it works. And I think the whole purpose of this whole scenario, and so because these rich and famous people have not been able to contact and are able to interact and contact with this satanic negative entity, they feel that that is really their true God now, because they feel let down, I think, by their original God. They don't understand that that God is not meant to interact directly with them, but that's understandable that they would take that choice in a way, because we've so much let this world get away from us. Whereas if we had, it's a bit hard to explain, but this has taken a long, long time. So if the world was better and things were going as planned, they probably would not take that choice. But because they have felt so alienated and lonely, as we all do, this is right, we feel as though there is no God for us, because we're meant to find that in ourselves and do the right thing, because we are more important beings than what we realise, but we've been made to feel limited. So then we look for it outside of ourselves, But that doesn't mean, as I've said before, that there isn't outside gods. It's just that our Creator God doesn't, I don't think, actually interacts as closely with us as what Satan does. This is the thing. So we feel, some people, that's why they turn to the dark side, because they feel that their own God is not in contact with them, and they want that God to protect them and to give them advice. But the God leaves it to us, the Creator God leaves it to us to figure things out. He's like, you're a spiritual being. You should know what is good and bad. You should have known not to even eat from the tree of good and evil at the start, even for that matter, but you took that choice and you went further and further and further. You never at any stage decided to regress and go back and say, hey, yeah, I've made a wrong turn, but I think I better go back down that path and try and get back on the right track. We don't do that. In fact, we've went further into the dark technological world. That's how I would see it. That's just putting it bluntly, and that's just my naughty opinion, okay? Because I have to say it and put it lightly, because I accept that I'm living in a negative, dark world, that there is no longer very much light in this world. But like I say, it's understandable that some of the rich and famous, who started out probably even more spiritual than me, that they've took that wrong choice because they felt that that darker God is giving them more and is more in contact with them and understands them more. They feel lost and alone with the real God, but that was the whole purpose. You're meant to find your way back to him. He's not meant to come and just pick you up at this point, or at any point has he done that much, not since the beginning. It's just like we were left to evolve as spiritual beings and meant to be in what they call that living library that was the world then, and meant to evolve and had everything given to us. So we had everything provided, we had everything given, but we got seduced and tricked to want more when we only had to stay and evolve naturally to where we would have had everything anyway, you see. So it was kind of like we got impatient or something, and that certainly suited the God, the other God, the negative, satanic fallen angel God, because he's like, hey, if you come with me, I can speed up your evolution. I can give you the tree of good and evil and of knowledge. Your God has lied to you. But of course, it's the other way around, because if you believe the fantasy, even, Satan is the master of all lies and deception. So he's the master of all lies and deception, because he knows the truth and he understands how things works, and he's a genius. He's a genius at a negative level, and he's able to trick the was able to trick and still able to trick the spiritual human beings who are unfortunately at their lowest level. If we were at our highest spiritual level, we wouldn't be tricked. We would see everything too, and we would see much more, and we would know not to be tricked. We wouldn't have to destroy or do anything bad to Satan or the negative forces. We would just walk away, because we would say, hey, unfortunately, we decline your offer because we have more in ourselves. You know, we don't need the technology because we can use our mind to do any of the things that your technology offers. But we don't, you know, that sort of thing. It's like that. But because we have already went down that path, and we accept the negative reality, and we accept our limitations and believe that that is what we are, and we think that we can't go back now too. I think a lot of people, even some that would be striving for spirituality, would probably think, hey, how can we go back? And also, how can we go back? Because most people don't want to go back, because most people don't know that. Most people are into the technological future, and the majority rules on this earth, so that's another point too. So the ones that are, if you do take a choice away from the technology and the God entity, you will be even more alone. And then your own God will not be much in contact with you too. So he will be really saying, this is the test of your life. For any of you that are religious along that line, and I would say this is just my observation, it's the test of your life. It is the true test of your life. In other words, you know, you now are in the position of having it all or nothing. You know, you can stay with this dark world in this technology and go right down in a way, or you can ascend to the very highest if you want to look at it that way. But it will be a tough choice, because it will not be made easy, because you're in a dark domain, because it's got darker and darker, and the technology and the God entity controls everyone and everything. And you are surrounded by artificial people. When I say artificial people, I mean that literally and figuratively and psychologically and spiritually, and I'm trying to use the words. In other words, like for instance, if you become too psychopathic, then you become, even though you're still a human being, and theoretically speaking, you could find your way back to being feeling and full of emotions and compassion, etc., you have actually gone in the other direction to where you are unfeeling, uncompassionate, unthinking that way. And don't forget that I would say this is just my view. Well, it's not just my view, it's actually a psychological fact that if you become too artificial and your intelligence becomes too artificial, and you become too psychopathic. You become intellectual over feelings and emotions. Not only are you giving up your creative ability to create reality via those things, even though we've all done it negatively, as I've said, you have made a choice to become you've I've gone off track. You've become an artificial human being in a way. In other words, what I'm saying is once you become too psychopathic, you're almost the equivalent to an artificial type of intellect, an artificial type of being without feelings and without compassion. And you become technological in a way, but you are not technological in the sense that you're still not a totally technological being, as some, they are usually created completely from scratch. But for all practical purposes, you will be very similar in your way of dealing with things. You will operate that way in reality. So what I'm trying to say is if you become too psychopathic, you actually will operate no different to a robotic, artificial type of intelligent type of human being. In other words, you will be very robotic. You'll be very, and that's the danger, I think, of that. The only good thing is that you, hopefully, by some miracle, you could come back and get back to being spiritual. In other words, get back your feelings and your emotions, because that is essentially what it really all is. This is the spiritual domain that has been taken over by a spiritual being that has also turned away from that and cannot go back, because once you incorporate too much technology into you, you can't even go back. So I believe that's probably a big mistake, even on the part of the God being, but that's something that happened. But also what I will say is this, and this is something that is a psychological fact that I've looked into in recent times due to the fact that I've had to, because I've experienced it myself in the past, but I've only dealt with people that are of this personality and of this way of thinking. And I didn't realise this until very recently. So that's another reason that I've also always been controlled by the dark forces, because I have been surrounded by human beings who are of the psychopathic personality type too. And they naturally are not going to push you in the direction of being a spiritual, feeling, thinking, compassionate, high level, free individual human being. They're going to restrict you and put you into the dark, negative way, to where then they can control you, because that is their aim. And that is the same with this whole world and the God entity. He needs you to serve him. He doesn't have unconditional love. Okay, that is not how it works. This world is not a world now where the God that controls it has unconditional love. You are not meant to be free. You are not meant to evolve yourself and think you are meant to be controlled by technology, and you are meant, and in return, some of you will be, looked after like a prize house cat, shall we say. You'll be looked after, but you'll still be a house cat. But some will be a looked after house cat, and some will be a stray cat that's left to die in the street, depending on how much you're willing to serve and bow down and show servience and show adulation and veneration to the God entity, because he needs this. The psychopathic, narcissistic people need this. It's the same thing. But what I'm saying is that what does happen when you give this over, something else happens, which I realised recently. and this is very serious. You don't just give over your feelings and your high spiritual level, and you're giving away everything really, but in becoming technological and intellectual, but thinking that you're an intellect and that you're highly intelligent, right? And then you use technology to even enhance that. Unfortunately, this is something that is not well known, but I now realise it. And the dark forces know it too, but they're not going to tell you this. You'll have to realise it for yourself, okay? I'm getting angry here because it does frustrate me. It's so tragic. But if you become intellectual, technical, to the exclusion of your feelings and your emotions, you will become insane. Now that's something that, and that is what has happened in this world. That is the joke of it. It's not a funny joke, but this is what happens. You need those feelings and those emotions to be rational and sane. So these are not things that should be dismissed in favour of technology and advancement that way and the intellect and all, because you'll be an intellectually insane, technologically advanced robot. That's what you'll become. I have to say that again, it just come to me now. I must be on a roll or something, but that's what happens when these things occur to you and you realise that it's true. The intellect is no good by itself. Without compassion, without emotion and without feelings, even if you don't believe that we're a spiritual being and all this other stuff that I've said, without that you will become cold, intellectual. But strangely enough, something happens, as it happens to the psychopath in our world. Sure, you will survive and you will tread over everyone. And you might, and if you're very intellectually advanced, you might do well, and if you serve the God, you'll be rewarded. But in a funny kind of way, you will not be sane, you will not be rational, you will lose what common sense and rationality. This is what happens. This is what I've seen myself. So although you've got this vast amount of information, you know, this intellect, and you've got this technology bombarding you with all this so-called information to where you think you're the smartest person on the planet, without those feelings and those emotions, you actually become quite irrational. You actually don't know how to live your life to where it really benefits you. You're at the mercy of the God entity, and you're at the mercy of this world completely. And you think, because you also are thinking with your intellect, and even your ego especially is predominant, you don't realise that you're actually not benefiting yourself at all. Most of the psychopaths and even narcissistic people that you see, if you really look at them in life, they have so much going for them, and it's only a few that actually get to the top because they know so much, but they don't really have that common rationality going half the time. They'll do something really good for a bit, and then they'll sabotage and defeat themselves. I've seen this because I have known so many, and I have been a bit that way myself at times, because if you're under that influence, and you know the old saying, you're only as good as the company you keep. If you live in a negative environment and surround yourself with negative people, obviously if you're born into it, you don't choose it. But it's still going to have that effect, and it's going to limit you. But you are going to lose your rationality. At some point, you're not, even if you're given the correct information, you just still will emotionally, because you'll be emotionally immature, you will still make the wrong choice. This is about emotional maturity is very important. That's what you call developing and growing up, for what I can gather. And this is what happens to people who become too psychopathic or too narcissistic, is that unless they're very lucky and they serve the God entity with their abilities, their emotional immaturity will defeat them, from what I can gather, because I see people that have got more knowledge than me and more intellectual, and they're just in the same boat as me. You know what I'm saying? They're not doing any good because their rationality is taken from them once you become without the feelings and things. You need those feelings and those emotions, strangely enough, to almost stabilise the intellect and the intelligence that you have. It's very hard to explain, but seems to be what happens. And this is why we were given these things. They're very important. And once you become technically, you become a robot, and therefore you are controlled completely. And unless you are serving the God entity, he can control you for negative. He can take you right down to your destruction. And if you're not wanted, or if there's too many of you, that's exactly what will happen. Okay, I'm going to try to finish up here. There was something else I was going to say. Yeah, another thing that I think has happened, and this is what I'm observing, and whether this is to do with technology, I would think it does. But if you look at the world now, and I'm talking about just humans, supposedly humans, okay? Humans as I assume myself to be, right? You know, I was talking about rationality right before, and the different personality types. Now, you lose the rationality by getting rid of your feelings and your emotions for that which is around you, for other human beings, other life force. You become all ego and all intellect. Okay. Now, but what I am trying to say is, and I'm not putting this very well now, I'm getting a bit tired. Look, in the past, the average person, from my observation, was not super intelligent, but they weren't stupid either. But they had, the average person, in other words, the majority of people, had what you'd call common sense. They had a rationality about them. They didn't know all the mysteries of the universe, no, and they didn't, and most of them were not in good jobs, and most of them probably did not understand a real lot about a lot of things. You know, even though I, as you know, am not a great believer in education at all, because I don't think it is education. But they were not, you know, in a high social thing, but they were the average person. They were doing okay. But if you actually spoke to them, they had a common sense and a rationality. If you put to them just basic things, they would know the sensible answer, the sensible alternative, how to, what benefited them, okay? They had normal intellect, you could say, a normal rationality, right? Average intelligence, you would even say. That's what I was always told. I was so-called average intelligence. Some of them were more practical than me. Most of them were more practical than me, more practical, more rational, more logical in their decisions and in their observations of things around them. Now, I could be wrong about this, but I don't think I am. But now I look at almost two extremes. There's almost two extremes of the humans. Then they're, in other words, what I'm trying to say is that what was once average, normal, and reasonable intelligence and good thinking, clear thinking, I would say, that now is not there in the average person anymore. I don't see it. because I used to see it all the time, and I used to think that I didn't have enough of it, and I didn't value it because it was so common. But I'm not seeing that now. I'm not seeing normal, rational intelligence in the average person. I'm seeing them do things that they wouldn't have done 40 years ago, and thinking even different. And this is because I think it's because of the technology, because they're just downloading all this thinking, and that becomes their thinking then. But it's not their thinking, it's the technology thinking for them, in a way. Because they often, if you ask them logical things, they now will say answers sometimes that you wouldn't have heard them say 40 years ago, which was logical and the right answer. It was logical, it was rational. Now you're getting irrational answers almost. It sounds smart, it seems to be intelligent, but it's not average, normal thinking or intelligence, in my opinion. It's gone. The average person that used to have reasonable thinking as it doesn't have that anymore. And you've almost got like two groups that are on the extreme. You've got the narcissistic kind of psychopathic personality, if you like, at one extreme, that can be highly intelligent. In other words, they could have abilities in certain fields and could maybe get a really top job and, yes, serve the matrix and serve the God. And then you get others that are just totally the other extreme, where people are not thinking at all. They're basically not thinking at all. And I think this is because they're letting the technology do the thinking for them. And so you've got the two extremes. And one is like a real control group, and the others are going to be a successful group, very highly successful group, I would think. But there's no more normal. There's no more normal in the centre, I don't think, you know. It's like these two extremes. So you've almost got complete stupidity on one end and high intelligence on the other, that's serving the matrix and serving the God entity. You've got no normal, rational, average people in the centre that made up the majority of the population anymore. And that's what kept this world sane. So now the world will go insane. That's what I'm trying to say, because you must have that. That which we took for granted, the average person that we probably didn't think was a big deal, is now becoming unique because it doesn't exist. We needed that. We need that now, because without that normal, rational, sensible, even decent human being, even if they're not spiritual, even if they're just knowing a little bit of what is right or wrong, but they're not out there making waves, shall we say, but they're just doing the right thing at a very limited, normal level. That has kept the world sane in a funny kind of way. I don't know if I'm explaining this, but that is gone now. That average, normal human being that made up the majority of the population, the average person, doesn't exist now, I don't think. I don't see it. I don't see it around where I am. Now maybe I'm in an island here, but I know it doesn't exist in the real world either, in the big world, because you only have to look at everything that's going on there, and I try not to even look. But what I'm saying is this has created more negativity, because without those normal, sensible, rational people that we took for granted, that's why I say we've got much worse, because it's not like things were great back then either. They weren't. In fact, I used to half, in my own arrogance and stupidity, think, oh, that average person, you know, the one you'd see around that just was very basic, but at least knew right from wrong and knew logic and knew the rationality of things. I used to half look down upon them myself, even though I was no better. But I just thought, oh, they're a bit common, you know, a bit this or that, bit basic, you know. Not, but that person is now unique, because that person that doesn't exist now kept this world sane, kept me and my environment sane too, because I was always a bit wacky. I was the odd one out, you know, and I was very mind controlled by the people around me and by the, I didn't know it, but I was always making, that's why I'm in the position, one negative choice after another. And the people, the very few people that I really loved, and the one most important person to me in all the world is the person that I have hurt and destroyed the most, and actually encouraged and contributed to becoming the very people that I'm talking about. Because if you, like if you're a mother and you bring up your child or neglect your child or allow it to be taken over by other negative people, then that child will become the psychopath or the narcissistic psychopath of the future. And then you will not be able to get through, or that person will then be part of this negative, insane world, and they will be lost too, because they will not be able to realise, there won't be enough sane, normal people around to get that person on track. In fact, the narcissistic psychopathic person will be dealing with other narcissistic psychopathic people. So it will almost seem justified to them that they are narcissistic and psychopathic. This is because the normal, rational, average human being has disappeared. There's no balance there to keep the whole world sane. And it becomes a necessary evil, as others have said, for the psychopath to almost flourish and to continue to be the psychopath. Because if you like, even myself, where I've decided to go back away from that, away from the negative, then you're going to be in a world surrounded by psychopaths and you'll be crushed. So the spiritual being will be living in a world of artificially intelligent, technologically controlled human beings. One way or the other, depending on how far the technology takes over, depending on how far the person allows themselves to become narcissistic, psychopathic, in other words, non-feeling, non-caring about what's around them. And then if everyone else is like that, they have to become more that way to survive. So there's no way that we're going to go back to being spiritual beings, because if you are a spiritual being, unless you can raise your vibration to a huge high level to where you are not impacted by what's around you and brought down to a negative level, you just won't survive. You will be crushed, because you'll be surrounded not only by negative environmental things, not only by your body and your mind being infiltrated and impacted by negative technology, negative physical things that are going on around, negative, everything negative, the body being made negative by everything that's in it, around it, etc. And then your mind being completely controlled by negative technology, in other words, negative information, negative, if you watch the TV, you see negative news, that brings you down. Common sense, and you see what I'm saying? I think so one thing is feeding the other to where we end up where there's no more normal intellect. There's no more normal human beings that are just rational, reasonably compassionate, caring human beings that care about themselves and care about their environment and care about those that are around them, because it serves them, because it's a benefit to them, and because it makes them feel good. There's none of that. That normal human being doesn't exist as far as I can see in the world. It's all fake. I am not saying I'm not saying there aren't some spiritual human beings left. Of course there are. By that I mean normal human beings. I'm not talking about your high, enlightened human being. That is your proper spiritual human being. There's very little of that. That's like saying some Messiah or something. That's religious in the extent that's unbelievable. That's like saying some. I could mention names of various prophets or various ones that have been and gone that people bow down to and believe, and this is true. And I'm not going to say how much part of God or if they are the whole God when they've come or not, because I don't know that, okay? There could have been individuals that come in human form that could be part of the God entity, certainly a representative and certainly a messenger, or they could be the God entity incarnate. I do not know these things, okay? So I'm not going to say that. That's for you to find out. And if you have found it out and if you believe it and if it is true for you and if you feel that spirit in you, then you are already way ahead of the game and ahead of everything. I only wish I could find it. But I think there is more truth to people who go along that line personally. And I think it's the only way if you are a spiritual human being, because there's not going to be very many alternatives for you, to be honest, anyway. And I would think that it is a way out of this world and this matrix, and even to survive while you are here, because anything that leads to where you feel at a high vibrational, high frequency level, and that does involve love, I would imagine, which is very hard. See, I cannot feel the love that is necessary because of the environment and because of the people around and because of the life and the guilt as well. See, there again, we are conditioned with the guilt because we have lived bad lives, because we have been controlled by the matrix, because we have made the wrong choices and created and hurt those that we love. It is very hard for us as spiritual beings, even the guilt. Guilt shows that we are spiritual human beings, because otherwise we wouldn't feel the guilt. But that's another thing too, because the guilt then can be worked against us to bring us down, which it does. So it's like saying, oh yeah, but I've done all this wrong. So how can I feel good? How can I be enlightened and feel that I'm a high spiritual good human being? And then there are the others that have gone the psychopathic route to where they've, which is what most people are now being convinced to go, and which their environment pushes them into. And then if they're surrounded by those people, you have to be psychopathic almost to survive. So it becomes a catch-22. And like I say, the normal, rational human being that had a little bit of compassion, a little bit of love, they weren't over the top. They weren't highly advanced spiritual beings, but they were average human beings, and they kept this world sane. Now we've gone further away from that into our intellect and technology and into our selfish, non-feeling, non-emotional way of all self. And that is defeating us even more. It's defeating us, and it makes us more that way. And then it makes us more lean towards the technology as our God. And it is our God, and it is the representation of the God that rules, because it uses the technology. It has incorporated technology into its being, and it wants us to be a representation of it, not a representation of the original creator God. And then it can say, as it is doing now, say to the original creator God, look at your creation. You rejected me. I'm a fallen angel. You threw me out of heaven because I transgressed a little bit. And yes, eventually I went totally out of kilter and what you could say irrational and out of balance, and what you would call technically not normal, technically unbalanced. Technically, yes, you could say insane. But I still was your chosen one, and you wanted me to serve the humans. I was not keen because I was superior. I was the exalted one. I did not want to be like some people that know that they're special, but are quite happy to look after the cat or the dog and to help that cat or dog to be the best that it can be. I did not want to do that. And you threw me out for all these things. And admittedly, then I went totally off the track completely. Now there again, I'm speculating on this, but when all this happened. But the point is that now we're in a situation where he is showing the Creator God, look at your creation. You thought they were special. They were your highly advanced, they were meant to be the most highly spiritual beings, a representation of you created in your image. Look at them. They now follow me, and they are now sunk to the lowest levels that they can be. They now represent not only me and serve me, but you made a mistake. You threw me out. Look, they're not special, they're corrupt. They do everything that a non-spiritual human being shouldn't do. And look at how they've advanced. They haven't advanced. They're now technological robots. They're psychopathic. You know, they hate you. They don't value spirituality. They don't even believe it exists. And they worship me, and they worship technology, and they live for themselves, and they hate more than they love. They don't even love themselves, most of them. And this is what you wanted me to serve. This was your special creation. Look. Look. Look at what they've become. And you threw me out for these humans. You were wrong. I was right. This is what Satan is saying to the Creator. Look, you were wrong. I was right. And I have my revenge now because I have lost everything because of that. Because I was once a high spiritual human being, once exalted to the highest, and now I'm a technological being that is running out of time and that is no longer an immortal spiritual being, but I have taken your prized creation down with me, and I will take your prized creation down with me. And I'm doing that even though, like the narcissistic and the psychopathic person, I live for the moment. So even though I know that it will not last long, maybe even, as the prophecy says, but look, your humans have contributed to the Archon prophecy, the negative prophecy being fulfilled, the destruction of the human race, the destruction of your prized creation, the destruction of the spiritual human being turned into a technological mind control fool that only worships negativity and themselves and basic survival and creates a destructive, negative world. Now, this is just the basics of it, and Satan then, you could say he's mocking the Creator if you look at that fantasy scenario, or you could say he's making a good point because it certainly has happened and he's proving that, or it's proving that. But, you know, what it really comes down to is that I still see a few spiritual human beings left that know this and that don't want to contribute to this and are even probably working against it, and maybe just want to remain a spiritual human being. Okay, now, you know, even in saying that, I make the video, and I don't know how many there are of this. I assume there might be some on the end of this so-called frequency line of the internet, you know, but, you know, we live in such a world of deception and such a world of mind control and such a world of fakery to where you can't tell the fake human beings from the few spiritual ones. And I say the few because I do not think there is very many left, personally, because the fake human beings copy the real spiritual human beings, and their thoughts are manipulated and monitored and controlled by the technology and by the God entity and his minions anyway. They've always had that ability, I think, to know the different timelines, I would imagine. They know what's going to happen, and they orchestrate everything, they control everything, and they control that by the human's mind. They've always manipulated our thinking. That's why humans have been convinced to be non-spiritual. In other words, every time a spiritual human being is convinced to destroy or fight another human being, whether it be in the name of peace or goodness or whatever, or something good, doesn't matter. They have convinced and brought the spiritual human being onto the dark side. And they are very clever at doing that. He's a mastermind. This being is a mastermind, and his minions are masterminds, and they follow all this. And they have their ideas, their goals of, they think they're right. Just as the rich and the famous that will trade their spirituality, or at least their belief in a different God, because they feel they've been let down and left to fend for themselves in their world, and they know that the true spiritual God probably will not give them fame and fortune. And they're like, hey, I've got an ability. I must sing, I must dance, I must do this, I must do that, I must do the things in my calling. They don't know that they would be better off probably just going back to their spirituality. That's their test, I guess, because it's asking a lot of someone to not sing if you've got a good voice. But also these people are deliberately given a good voice so that they are tested spiritually. If you follow what I'm saying, I would think that the rich and the famous and every ability we're given it to use it for good or for bad, or to even choose to not use it at all if that means serving the dark side. That's a very big test. This is the fantasy scenario we're in the video game, so it's a very big test. It's a huge challenge for people, and you cannot blame a lot of them for choosing to serve the dark God entity in a way, if this is the true reality, okay? You can't blame them. This is a whole fantasy thing that I'm talking here, but you can't blame them in a way for being seduced into that, in light of the fact that they're put into this world with free will and are left to fend for themselves. But because they're not at a high spiritual level and we're all in the dark, it is so easy to turn to the dark side that is in more contact. And if that dark side rewards you for serving them, of course you're going to think that the dark side is a very benevolent God even. But the dark side and the benevolent God, you must remember that if you take that fantasy story, the benevolent God really does not really unconditionally love the humans, and in a funny kind of way actually resents them, because it was thrown out of the heavens because of not wanting to tend to and look after the sheep or the humans. Thought it was beneath them, and just didn't, for some reason, because they had been so exalted for so long, did not want to do that. Another might have actually looked and loved to do that. because as spiritual beings, you're probably supposed to enjoy that. But for whatever reason, that happened. It's sad in a way, sad all round, the whole scenario. But unfortunately, it's no good me feeling sorry or being too sympathetic that way, because that sympathy and understanding, a bit like with some humans that you deal with, isn't necessarily going to change them to turn around and go back to being spiritual or feeling or emotional in a compassionate, empathetic way, shall we say. No, that's probably not going to happen. And more so as they're rewarded with power and their, what they originally liked anyway, which was given to them freely originally in heaven to be exalted and revered and looked up to and worshipped even by many. Yeah, so they were, you know yourself, if you were like a king and then you kicked off your throne and thrown out and forced to walk in the wilderness, and you've took a few followers with you, you're probably going to want to try and get that throne back somehow. You're probably going to get angrier and angrier because you've had so much. And you're probably going to be resentful and not understand even why it happened. Especially if you went a bit out of kilter, you're not going to understand that maybe the God might not have had much choice. I don't know. I don't know myself. I'm only piecing together the story and trying to make some rationale of it. But you know what I'm trying to say. And I'm trying to be, as I live in the dark side's world, I don't want to be too negative that way. But I do actually have an understanding, because I see that in human beings. Humans reflect the God entity now. You see how resentful they are and how they become negative and selfish, and that's what we all do. And we blame everything else but themselves. Even I, in blaming the God entity, Satan, whatever you like, am absconding a little bit myself for all the wrong choices I've made. I'm saying, hey, yes, I was put in these positions, but I made the wrong choice. I still, as a spiritual being, made the negative choices on those that I should have loved and did love, but selfishly made the wrong choices to preserve my hide or my existence to be a little bit comfortable for a few more years. Even though I was riddled with guilt anyway, so it didn't quite work either way. And now, as times went on, it has just become one negative thing on another. That's why I say we fulfill the Archon negative future prophecy. Every time we do something negative, we are contributing to the God entity taking over this world and closing it down and defeating God's kingdom, you could say, or God's original living library of spiritual human beings that were meant to be the pride of the universe or the pride of the vast whatever is. Instead, we are now the lowest, and the dark force has shown God and showing God every day, hey, you made a big mistake there. They're not wonderful spiritual human beings. Look at their world. Look at them. Look who they were. Not only that they worship the one that you told to leave, but that they behave even more negatively. He doesn't have to directly make the humans behave negatively. They are now following in his footsteps at a spiritual and mental level daily. We are his minions, we represent him, and we are like little versions of the dark God entity, whereas we're meant to be versions of the creator God entity, the spiritual being, you see. So we've went in the other direction and represent, and we're now got Satan's kingdom on earth, not the God creator's kingdom on earth at all. It's now that if you want to look at this fantasy realm of religious that fantasy of what we originally thought was the battle between good and bad, the Satan versus God. If you want to look at it that way, that's what we now have. And the wind is blowing up now outside, and it is not a healthy, happy wind. It has an eeriness, an almost haunted devil quality to it, like you'd get in a terrible horror movie. But of course, even the horror movies, as I've said before, they represent the vampire, all that sort of stuff is how the humans are now. They're like vampires on one another. We represent the God entity now, the God entity that rules this world, not the God entity that originally created us, the God entity that intercepted, manipulated, controlled, changed us, and to where we only live now in the physical 3D world exclusively, and we believe that is all there is, and we worship that, and we're preoccupied with that. It's not our fault. It's not my fault either. And I still like these things. But that is the idea, so that you don't it's like I say, it's got to the point now to where in the past we had a little bit more of a choice to go a little bit spiritual and be a bit materialistic and physical as well, whereas now we're like, it's just one extreme to the other. You're either going to suffer greatly in this real world and be a little bit spiritual, or you're going to go to the dark side and be completely materialistic and selfish and live a short, happy life or whatever. But, you'll be rewarded greatly. It's almost like there's nothing in between now. There's no normal, there's no compromise, because the world is split up that now, because we are in very different times, and the technology has separated that much more so, because even the average normal human being that had a little bit of spirituality, a little bit of rationality, a little bit of decency, a little bit of common sense, that person hardly exists now. I could be one of them. And that was what you called the average human being. That wasn't your high spiritual human being or your religious person or anything. That was just your average, decent, normal human being that is gone. Or at least if there might be some there, but there's probably some. But I'm talking about, if you're talking about 7 billion people, there's really a very small number. I'm not seeing any around where I am, but I'm sure there's some out there. But even that is a long way. That human being was a long way from what the original God in this fantasy scenario I'm painting originally intended. Even that was like a very limited human being. But that human being doesn't seem to exist much now. In fact, that could be one of the few spiritual human beings left. That's how bad it's got. That's what I think. That's what I see anyway. If you are going along that line, if you think there's any reality to this or to that, but anyway, that's it. And the little bit of energy I've got, I put into that, and if it's my last video, which it probably won't be, but it could be. You never know. You just don't know in this world, and so that's why I just thought that I wanted to put that scenario there. If it fits with everything else, and if it gives you something a little bit more. See, the main problem I find is that probably the people I'm speaking to, the ones that are on this same kind of plane, shall we say, they probably already know this and much more. And they're probably more, and I do hope that's the case. And I only wish that I had known these things years and years ago and made the right choices in life, because maybe if I had made the right choices and shown proper care and love to those that were in my close vicinity, because that's really all you can do. You can't change the world. You can only operate at your own limited little level. And if I had done this, maybe this very surroundings that are around me now may not have even existed. It might have been a different world. I don't know. It depends on how much is the word power, or how much vibration each human being really puts out and how important it really is. And it also depends on how many human beings are really here that are spiritual, real human beings, and how many are not, like false human beings to some extent, shall we say, too, because if you have a large number, as I've said before, and I say this, look at all the movies, because I would have to doubt this reality completely. Look at all the movies. I say this, if you're like me and you've got no real knowledge and no real history, and you haven't looked into things for a lifetime, and you're almost very ignorant, and you want to know what the real reality is, or what's really going on, and what the potential is behind the curtain, shall we say, behind the scenes, what you don't see, and that is the real reality, what you see in the movies, what they're capable of doing. Because you can't just make a movie and say, oh, yes, we can create this and this can. No, this is all because someone has already knows this. If you presume, as I have most of my life, that some people have just got a vast imagination. I mean, you could say that I've got a vast imagination saying what I'm saying now, but it's not that. It's information. It's actually the truth, or at least it's what I have been informed of, and what I am. I could be totally just downloading technology that's all false. That's right. I could be further away from my spiritual truth by even believing anything that I see on a technological device, even the movies. But I am saying that I believe, and this is the only reason I say this, because mostly what you would get from technology would have to be a negative. But I'm saying that because we are spiritual beings and were special originally, I believe that even the dark forces have to show us the truth and give us the choice. We have to create the negative reality in order for him or her or it to be able to say, hey, look, I have defeated your creation. I have defeated the humans. They were given free choice. I have not just killed them off. I have not done any wrong. You cannot destroy me directly right this very moment. And that's why these things have gone on for so long, because the humans have still got the free choice. It's only when we no longer have total free choice and humans are completely reduced to rubble or nothing, to where they're no longer spiritual, that then the prophecy or the end can come. But while we still have free choice, there is still that potential to take things back. And there's also the potential then for the dark force to still keep ruling and to still keep, manipulating things. But because it is a free universe, evidently, this is what I've been informed, I've said before, and because humans were given free will and it's a free universe, you cannot wipe out the whole species. Like, technologically speaking, the dark Satan, the dark God, can wipe out all humans in the blink of an eye right this very minute. He's always had that potential. More so as times went on, because don't forget, originally he was technologically advanced, but if you're dealing with more and more thousands of years, this entity has become even more technologically advanced. And either way, we know that even as humans we can wipe ourselves out, because we have allowed ourselves to invent technology, and that could be used, and we can destroy ourselves. But there is a universal law that you can't wipe out a whole species or a whole. You can't do that, evidently. But yes, you can convince them to wipe themselves out. You can convince them to invent technology, or to invent a bomb, or to invent, and you can wipe them out even slowly and insidiously if you show them that wrong things are taking place, but they ignore it or they don't quite get it. But you give them the information in the movies. You show what you are capable of as a god, and what the future will hold, and what is potentially there, and you rely on their ignorance and our innocence, I would say. I would say innocence because I know I've been innocent. Ignorant and innocent, okay? I've been ignorant, innocent, and that's how a lot of people are, where you say, oh, that's just a movie. Oh, yes, I know that they did say they could do something a few years ago, but I look around and I don't see it, so maybe it doesn't exist. And yes, oh, that person's just a very talented scriptwriter, that they can think up all these vast technologies and scenarios in all these movies and all these monsters and all these technology, all the stuff that you see in science fiction and your horror movies and stuff. No, they are not any better than you out there. They are just told to make that script. So they give you the information, the truth, and you have to discern and say whether you think it's a possibility or a reality or not. And they rely on you not seeing it that way, because I know I haven't. And even now I find it mind-blowing that it is a possibility and that it is a reality. I still can't believe it, but I know that that's what they do. That's the whole idea. That is the truth being put to you. So you make a choice and you've been shown the truth. So then if you are defeated by that technology, or if you are wiped out by that illness or that disease or all the things that they put in the movies, you have been shown that this is a reality. And you've said, I don't care. Just like if you are given a cure for something or if someone says that drink is not good for you, you shouldn't drink too much, and you choose to drink, or this, like all the things that we do, that we all do. Every day I'm poisoning myself and I know it. So it's a choice. So you know the truth, but you still make that negative choice because it's either easy or you can't see an alternative. But there's 1,000 reasons that you make. And sometimes if you're at a low vibration, as we all are, you just say, I just don't care. And if you're like me and you say, well, it's such a negative world, I'm not going to fight for it. I'm not going to fight for my survival in a negative world because I don't want to live in a negative world. And so that also is it. You see, it gets you like that. They get you in that treadmill, in that catch-22, shall we say. And so, yeah, so that's what it is anyway. I better close off. Thank you for listening if anyone has, and I'm sure I forgot some things, but I just wanted to try to simplify what I was trying to say yesterday, but as usual, I haven't simplified it, but I hope that I added something to it. And it's a fantasy scenario in a way, but everything that is fantasy is also the true reality in this world, because it is a mixed up, crazy world. And what you think is real is not, and what you think is not real is real. Everything is upside down, everything is reverse. That is how the dark force works, but also that is how the real world works if you really look at it. So it's like that. You have to say, what is real, what isn't? What do I believe? What do I really think I am? Do I really think that, yes, that things have changed a lot? And that's going to be hard too, because how do you look back and say, yes, things have changed and got negative? Look, it's what I said about human beings, even the average person being more balanced and more sensible, more logical, and more just average intelligence was what I would call reasonable intellect. They weren't rewarded for it. But some of those people had great potential, but they were probably kept down by the matrix, as we all are anyway. I'm saying that average person does not exist now, and I wonder why. What a lot of people would have half thought was very common and even half looked down upon, or certainly not looked up to anyway, not thought a big deal. That is a rarity now, Because while they were like that, normal, they still had the potential to rise to the very highest. And they also, as I said, kept this world sane. That average person is not there now to keep this world in balance and to keep it sane. And that's why we're in this mess. It's not a mess, it's worse than a mess. But that's just what I thought anyway, and that's what I've observed, because I'm able to think back and say, hey, that average person was actually a lot more advanced than what they realised, and we took them for granted because they don't exist now. Actually, they should have now advanced to a higher level, but instead we've become so technological and non-thinking that that person that was average now, to me, looks very superior, because I don't see that basic logic and common sense and rationality and what I would call intelligence, good intelligence, not artificial intelligence, good intelligence, sensible intelligence, emotional intelligence. Without emotional intelligence, you can't really be logical or really be really intelligent, I don't think. That's what I think anyway. Could be wrong, but I don't think so. And I'm not going to change my mind on that. But the rest of the world seems to have decided that, yes, the technological intelligence is the way to go. Technological intelligence is not intelligence, it is a takeover of your mind. It doesn't add to, it takes over your mind and obliviates your mind, disintegrates it. It's like letting another being come in and take over. You don't exist anymore if you let technology take over to too much of an extent. And don't presume that while you've just got it in your hand that it's not taking over. Don't presume that while it's running through the air that it's not affecting you and that it's not taking over you. And if you like it and you don't mind your body being destroyed by it and you don't mind your mind being taken over to it and you're willing to bow down to the God entity that controls it, that is your choice and that is your right, because you still have a little bit of free choice left at this stage. And if you choose to go down that path with the God entity, that is your right and your choice. And it is not for anyone to stop you, nor can anyone stop you. But, maybe if you look at all the movies, I would say look at all the movies and say, at least try to figure out what's really going on, the big picture, the whole picture. But see, even the movies, they show you the whole truth. But there's still, the idea of a movie is still to seduce you. So in other words, if I watch a movie and I see things in that movie that are not happening right now, but they're a potential for the future, but that is presented to me in an attractive, seductive manner, I'm still going to buy into that future, you see. So so it's, you're still going to have to say to yourself, that is what they can do, that is what they have done, that is what is available, that is the future and that is the potential. But they're also selling you that. They want you to want that future. They want you to want that product. They want you to be like those people or those beings that are in the movies. They don't want you to stay as you are. They want you to become what is in the movie. They want that future. And they want you to buy into that and want that future too. So it's a bit like watching those alien movies, right? You're seeing the alien as frightening and as whatever. But you're still buying into that future. You're still buying into that movie. You're entering into that movie and that technology. You're not buying into seeing it as a fear, and it should be a fear. Gotta go.